The room was brighter than usual, but King Charles's eyes stayed fixed on the gray clouds just beyond the palace window. Across from him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat poised, lips tight, her expression somewhere between suspicion and conviction. The media had called it a historic conversation. Buckingham's staff had called it unnecessary. Charles had called it overdue. "You know why I'm here," AOC said sharply, folding her hands atop a folder marked Imperial Legacies and Climate Debt. Charles turned to face her, slow but deliberate. "I suspect it's not to exchange recipes." There was a forced chuckle from a nearby advisor. No one else smiled. "You represent an institution," she said, "that's built its throne on the backs of the global South. On exploitation. And now you lecture the world on justice?" Charles didn't flinch. He had heard these accusations before, but never in such blunt American cadence. He leaned forward slightly. "And you represent a country that's rewritten history every time it was inconvenient." A flicker of defiance crossed AOC's face. "We didn't build empires." "No," Charles said. "You just inherited the mess and handed out microphones." The air tightened. Two worlds, two visions, face to face. "Your monarchy," AOC pressed on, "symbolizes oppression to millions. You wear jewels that were never yours. You sit on land guarded by stolen legacy. And you still act surprised when we call it out." Charles studied her carefully. "I don't deny history. But shouting at it doesn't fix the present. Sometimes noise is needed to wake the deaf," AOC replied coldly. Charles stood, adjusting his cufflinks. "No, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. Noise is what fills rooms when substance is missing. You're not here for justice. You're here for a clip." A sharp silence followed. Even the guard stiffened. "I'm here," she said finally, standing too, "because people like you still think dignity is something you can bestow." Charles met her eyes. "Dignity isn't taken. It's lived. And I won't apologize for a crown I wear with duty." AOC's reply came not in words, but in a glare that could split stone. The cameras were rolling. The world was watching. And neither one intended to blink first. Outside the palace walls, headlines were already spinning. AOC confronts the crown. Charles holds his ground. But inside, the tension hadn't eased. Tea had been served. No one touched it. AOC stepped toward a small framed tapestry on the wall, one Charles had personally requested from Ghana during his earlier Commonwealth visit. "Isn't it ironic," she said, running a finger just short of the glass, "that you collect pieces from places your ancestors dismantled?" Charles didn't rise to the bait. Is it ironic to preserve culture, or to pretend outrage while tweeting from a phone built with cobalt? The words landed hard. She turned back, jaw tightening. "So, is that it? Whataboutism wrapped in royal silk?" Charles's voice remained calm. Perspective wrapped in centuries of learning. The advisors watched like statues. No one dared interrupt what now felt like a diplomatic duel. "You preach duty," AOC fired back. "But duty doesn't absolve impact. What you wear, what you represent, people died for it." "I'm aware," Charles said. "And I wake each morning asking what I can do to be worthy of the position history gave me." "Do you?" For a moment, she was silent. "Then, I ran for office to change a system." "You were born into one and chose to keep it." "I was born into a cage," Charles corrected. "One lined with gold perhaps, but a cage nonetheless." The admission caught her off guard. Not vulnerability, truth. And it didn't feel rehearsed. Charles stepped toward the fireplace, where a single photograph of Queen Elizabeth stood. He paused. "You think I cling to power? But I walk daily under the weight of tradition most wouldn't survive an hour carrying." AOC's reply was almost a whisper. Then maybe it's time to set that weight down. Charles looked at her, eyes steadier than ever. Only when I'm certain those reaching for it can carry it with honor, not just noise. And with that, he turned back to the fire. The heat wasn't just coming from the flames. AOC broke the silence this time. So that's your answer to everything? Honor? Duty? Tradition? Those words don't feed people. They don't cool a burning planet. They don't return what was taken. Charles remained still. And slogans do? She took a breath. Her hands were clenched now. Slogans rally the unheard. You stand in a palace where silence is power. I stand in chambers where shouting is survival. He turned slowly, gaze steady. Then perhaps we both speak too loudly for different reasons. There was a flicker in her eyes, recognition, maybe. A slight disruption in the storm. Charles walked past her and motioned toward a portrait near the window, Queen Victoria. She thought the empire would last forever, he said quietly. History humbled her. It humbles all of us, eventually. AOC stepped beside him. Then why were the weight of what should have been buried? Because sometimes, Charles said, it is better to carry a legacy with remorse than abandon it to those who would rewrite it. The words settled between them like dust in sunlight. Neither soft nor sharp, but impossible to ignore. You think I'm here to destroy what you are, she said, more softly now. But I'm here to expose what it became. How many voices it silenced. Charles nodded slightly. And I think you're here to be heard more than to listen. A pause. You mistake criticism for ego, she added. No, Charles replied. I mistake performance for change. That line pierced deeper than anything yet. She looked at him, and for the first time, her expression betrayed uncertainty. He didn't press. He let the air speak. Perhaps, she muttered, you're not the man they said you were. Charles looked at her plainly. Perhaps you're not the enemy I expected. There it was. A standoff melting, just slightly, into understanding. Only slightly. The late afternoon sun crept across the marble floor, stretching thin golden beams through stained glass. Outside, a small crowd was gathering near the gates, some waving American flags, others Union Jacks. Inside, however, the flags had been folded. The truth didn't need decoration today. Charles motioned to an armchair, inviting AOC to sit. She hesitated but accepted. He remained standing. Let me ask you, he began, what would you have me do? Abdicate? Apologize for ancestors I never met? Return artifacts until the walls are bare and the past is paper thin? I'd have you start with honesty, she replied. Real, public, unfiltered honesty. Not curated compassion. Charles raised a brow. You assume honesty and simplicity are the same thing. They're not. Then tell the world what you just told me, she challenged. Say the empire was wrong. Say it clearly. Charles paced slowly. And what would that achieve in a world that scrolls, not reflects? A moment of applause before the next outrage? It would show courage, AOC said, leaning forward. Real courage. Not the ceremonial kind. He stopped. You think speaking is harder than staying silent beneath centuries of weight? AOC met his gaze. You think silence makes you noble? Charles stepped closer. I think silence sometimes protects a nation from breaking. You confuse noise with strength. But strength is restraint. Her lips parted but no words came out. He pressed on. You wear urgency like armor. But it's a double-edged blade. If I swing it carelessly, I cut the very people I claim to serve. I have to move slow because history watches every step I take. That's the excuse of every cautious king, she said. No, Charles corrected gently. It's the burden of one who's seen what reckless revolutions leave behind. The air thickened again, not with hostility, but with complexity. And for once, AOC didn't fire back. Because somewhere, she felt the edge of that burden too. The weight in the room had shifted. Not gone, but heavier in meaning, lighter in venom. Charles moved to a side table, lifting an old leather-bound journal. "My father wrote this," he said, offering it but not extending it too far. He believed every monarch must write, not just read. Even kings forget too easily. AOC hesitated, then took it. She flipped through the pages, notes, reflections, griefs in neat cursive. No headlines. No filters. Just one man's battle with inheritance. "Your father," she said slowly. "Was he like you?" Charles's eyes softened. "More steel. Less talk." "And your sons?" she asked. Charles offered a sad smile. "One wants peace. One wants attention." The indirect reference to Harry wasn't lost on her. But she didn't press. Not now. Instead, AOC closed the book and handed it back. "You said I came here for noise. Maybe. Maybe I wanted to disrupt something. Shake the walls." "And did you?" he asked. She looked around. "They're still standing." Charles nodded. But perhaps, they heard. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, contemplative. "You know," AOC said, "my district in New York doesn't have cathedrals. We have corner stores and overworked nurses." "I've seen your speeches," Charles replied. "You carry them with conviction." "Conviction without power is just performance," she said. "And power without reflection is tyranny," Charles countered. Their eyes locked again. This time, not as adversaries, but as people who had walked through different fires and emerged with different scars. "I won't pretend to support your crown," AOC said quietly. "I wouldn't ask you to," Charles replied. "Only that you respect the silence it sometimes carries." A breeze stirred the curtains. And for a moment, just one moment, the king and the congresswoman weren't symbols. They were people trying to understand the weight they both wore. The hour grew late, but neither one moved to leave. Charles walked slowly toward the far wall, where a carved map of the British Empire once hung. Now, in its place, stood a single-framed quote, faded, but powerful. "The sun never sets, but history always rises." AOC read it aloud. "Romantic for something built on conquest." Charles turned his gaze to the floor. "Romantic, or haunted? Depends on who's reading it." She stepped closer. "That's the thing, Charles. You see ghosts. We live with consequences." He nodded. "I believe you. But my ghosts built this house. Your consequences want to tear it down." AOC looked around. "Some houses deserve collapse. And some," he replied firmly, "require renovation, not destruction." The metaphor lingered. Both understood its weight. "You know," Charles added, "I've met survivors. Children of the Raj. Elders from Rhodesia. They don't ask for vengeance. They ask that we remember. And yet remembering alone," AOC replied, "won't fill the void." Charles's voice was quieter now. "And what fills it, Congresswoman? Rage? Statues toppled? Flags burned? Or do we attempt the hardest thing, continuity without denial?" She crossed her arms. "The hardest thing is admitting you benefited. Still benefit. And so do you," he said, almost gently. "You fight an empire while holding a passport that once built one. You speak of justice while walking halls funded by systems not so different from mine." She flinched, not in guilt, but in recognition. "We are all entangled," Charles continued. "You want clarity. But history is a tapestry, not a headline. I want repair, she said. Then don't unravel, rethread. The room was still again. As if both had exhausted the language of argument. Two figures stood at the crossroads of past and future. Neither fully right. Neither fully wrong. And both, somehow, still standing. I didn't come here to lose, AOC said, breaking the quiet. Charles arched a brow. Nor did I. A half-smile tugged at her lips. Then perhaps we both leave with bruises. Bruises, Charles mused, are better than scars. She stepped toward the window, gazing at the growing crowd. Signs waved, phones flashed. Power is performance. Silence is violence. And somewhere among them, a Union Jack with a crown drawn over in red. You know, she said softly, my critics call me performative. And mine call me irrelevant. She turned. Maybe we're both wrong about each other. Maybe, Charles replied, that's where growth begins. It was a strange moment, neither victory nor surrender. Just clarity. A clearing of smoke between two stubborn fires. What happens next? AOC asked. Charles gestured toward the closed doors. They'll edit the footage. Spin it. Frame it. You'll be quoted in bold. I'll be captioned in italics. You think I came for the cameras? No, he answered. But I think you've learned to survive them. AOC nodded. So have you. He stepped toward her now. You wield a microphone. I wear a crown. Neither guarantees wisdom. Both attract noise. And yet we keep showing up, she said. Because legacy, Charles murmured, isn't made in comfort. There it was, an unexpected alignment. Not agreement. But understanding. A knock came at the door. An aide peeked in. Your Majesty, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, the press is ready. She glanced at him. Side by side? If you wish, Charles replied. She paused, then nodded. They stepped toward the hallway, where the world waited, not for answers, but for headlines. But for once, the real story had already happened, inside, between a king and a congresswoman. The hallway echoed with footsteps, hers confident, his composed. As they reached the briefing room, the hum of cameras grew louder. Reporters lined the perimeter like vultures, ready to feast on a misstep. AOC glanced at Charles. I usually enter rooms like this swinging. Charles replied without looking at her. And I've been taught to never flinch. The doors opened. Flash. 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 They stepped forward together, and for a moment, the media buzz dipped, just slightly, as confusion replaced expectation. No one expected them side by side. No one could read what had passed between them. Yet something in their presence silenced the noise, even if only for a breath. Charles took the podium first. We had a conversation, difficult, uncomfortable, but necessary. And I believe it's the kind of conversation institutions too often avoid. AOC folded her arms but nodded slowly. A monarch must listen, Charles continued, even when the echo is harsh. And today, I listened. I also spoke. As a son, a father, and as someone who lives in a palace but walks in a shadow. A murmur moved through the room. He stepped aside. AOC took the mic. I came here expecting deflection. Instead, I got engagement. We didn't agree on everything. We didn't have to. But we said what needed to be said. She paused, scanning the room. History doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to those who dare to speak when it's easiest to stay safe. And today, I saw something I didn't expect in this room, reflection. The applause was hesitant. Journalists weren't sure what to make of what they'd just witnessed. The moment didn't end in cheers. It ended in respect. And in a world starving for spectacle, that was revolutionary enough. The press room emptied slowly, but the murmurs remained like ghosts in marble. Every outlet rushed to package the moment, some painting AOC as victorious, others framing Charles as dignified under fire. No one captured the quiet that followed. In the corridor behind the stage, Charles and AOC stood alone for the first time without cameras, aides, or agendas. "You handled that well," she said. Charles gave a half-smile. "I've had practice." "I meant the honesty. The restraint." She hesitated. "That's rare." "So is someone who enters this house with fire and leaves with thought." There was something changed in her now, still defiant, but tempered. As if the echo chamber she usually occupied had cracked a little. "Do you ever tire of being misread?" she asked. "Often," Charles answered. "But I've learned to let the noise pass through me." "You?" "I try to outshout it," she said. "Doesn't always work." Charles offered a nod. "The danger isn't in being misunderstood. It's in believing the misunderstanding." That struck her deeper than she expected. She looked away for a moment. "Do you think legacy matters?" "It's all that does," he said. "But only if you're willing to build it for those you'll never meet." She turned to him again. "Not for headlines. Not for applause." "No," Charles said. "For impact." The silence between them was no longer tense. It was reflective, like two soldiers after a long battle, not enemies, but witnesses to the same war. She extended her hand. He took it. And with that gesture, something subtle shifted, not in politics, not in monarchy, but in the conversation itself. They walked down opposite halls, but not in opposition. The day ended not with grand declarations, but with two exits, one to the left, one to the right. AOC returned to her car, greeted by aides armed with tweets and soundbites. Charles stepped into a quieter vehicle, no flashing bulbs now, only the weight of reflection riding with him. Back at Buckingham, Charles removed his coat, unfastened the pin of the Order of the Garter, and sat at his writing desk. He opened a fresh page in a leather journal, his own continuation of his father's legacy. He wrote, "Today I met someone who does not kneel, nor does she expect others to. She challenges power, yet forgets she holds it too. In her, I saw a mirror, cracked, imperfect, but clear enough to see my own blind spots." He paused. "We did not settle the world. But we unsettled comfort. And that is where change often begins." Across the Atlantic, AOC sat alone in her apartment. The city hummed outside, but she was still. Her phone buzzed, clips of the exchange going viral already. Opinions flying like daggers. She ignored them. Instead, she opened her notes app and typed. "A king who listens. Who doesn't flinch. Who fights silence with steadiness. I didn't expect that. And maybe that's the lesson. Not all crowns are blind. Not all rebellion is loud. The public would spin the story. But the truth? The truth lived not in applause, but in what they both carried quietly after. Legacy isn't forged in the spotlight. It's written in the silence that follows.